AITA for asking my dad's new wife to leave after she tried to take control of my house. It all blew up a year ago, last October. My dad came home with a serious face, like he was about to deliver bad news from work or something. But no. He sat down in the living room, called my mom in, and asked me to stay too. I was 25 at the time, already living with them again because I was saving up to buy my own place. Everything seemed normal until he dropped the bomb. I'm leaving. Just like that. My mom didn't react immediately. She thought it was a stupid joke or that he'd had a fight with someone. But he was direct. He said he'd fallen in love with another woman, that he couldn't keep living a lie, that he deserved to be happy, that he hadn't felt the same way about my mom for years. I froze, not because of the news itself, but because of the flat, dry way he delivered it, like he was canceling a streaming service, not a family. That same night, he packed his bags and left. He moved to an apartment downtown, where his new woman lived, one we didn't even know, a woman in her early 30s, while my dad was already over 50. It's not that it's wrong to have a new relationship. Everyone lives their own life. But what hurt was the way he did it, the speed, the coldness, as if we were a phase he was no longer interested in. My mom tried to stay strong. She never insulted him or spoke ill of him, at least not in front of me. But I heard her crying at night. I saw her looking at her phone waiting for texts that never came. I saw her lose weight unintentionally. She started spending more time at work, I guess to avoid being alone in the house. I tried to be there for her, but I was also wrestling with my own anger. Weeks passed. My dad called me from time to time as if nothing had happened, as if life was going on as normal. He told me about his new girlfriend, about the plans they had together. I could barely contain myself. What bothered me wasn't that he had another woman. It was that he tried to sell me the idea that everything was fine, as if he hadn't shattered my mother, as if I should applaud him for following his heart. A month later, he asked me to go to lunch. I went because I wanted answers. He took me to an expensive restaurant, as if that made up for everything. He introduced me to his new girlfriend. He didn't even warn me. Suddenly she was sitting there, smiling, as if we were a happy family. She was young, heavily made up, with that fake smile that doesn't quite meet your eyes. She greeted me as if we'd known each other before, and my dad acted like everything was normal. It was disgusting. After that, I distanced myself. I didn't answer his calls. I didn't want anything to do with him. I avoided him even at Christmas, until in March he showed up with another bombshell. We're looking for a bigger place. But in the meantime, do you think we could stay with you for a few months? He texted me. He didn't even have the guts to call. He wanted to move in with me, with her, to my house, where I used to live with my mom, where I was rebuilding myself too. At first, I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. They were looking for a way to save money, according to him. She had just lost her job, and he had a project in the works, but it hadn't taken off yet. I told him I needed to think about it. Deep down, I already knew I didn't want to, but there was also that part of me that still saw him as my dad, that voice that said, "Don't be a jerk, help him, he's your blood." I thought about it for days, talked to my mom, who by then had moved to another state with a friend. She told me to do what made me feel at peace. She neither encouraged nor discouraged it. She's always been like that, no pressure. In the end, I agreed. I set clear conditions. Only for 3 months, total respect for my space, no imposing rules. They agreed verbally, but I already knew something was going to go wrong. And it did, very quickly. They moved in on a Monday afternoon. She arrived with more boxes than him. I'm not exaggerating. It looked like she was settling in for good. She brought her clothes, her makeup, a coffee maker that, according to her, was essential, fake plants, wall decorations with cheesy inspirational quotes that made me want to vomit. My dad only had a suitcase and his laptop. Everything else was hers. That was the first sign. She was marking territory. I put up with it the first week. I told myself it was temporary, that I could survive. I worked from home, editing videos and designing for digital campaigns, so I needed peace and quiet. I asked them from the beginning to keep their noise to a minimum. But she had loud calls all day, watching reality TV with the volume up, laughing like she was in a sitcom laugh track, the kind of fake laugh you can't ignore. Not only that, 3 days after moving in, she had already changed things in the kitchen. She kept the basics, but she started moving the cups, putting in her fancy spices, rearranging the pantry, as if it were hers. She didn't even ask me. I found out because one day I opened it to look for my coffee, and it wasn't where it always was. I asked her, and she replied with that passive-aggressive tone. Oh, I thought it would be easier for you this way. I'm not the tittiest person in the world, but I have my system. She started putting her hand in everything, washing my dishes without asking, and then complaining that I left them dirty, suggesting I do laundry at a certain time to save energy. Once, she even left me a list of little things we could improve around the house. Excuse me, we? The worst thing is that my dad didn't say anything. He laughed nervously as if he didn't know what to do, and every time I spoke to him privately, he asked me for patience. Give her time, she's getting used to it, he said. But it wasn't her who had to adapt. It was my house, my space, my life, and they were invading it with no respect whatsoever. By the second week, I was at my limit. She started inviting her sister, an equally unbearable woman, who came with her baby, who screamed like he was possessed. They would sit on the couch watching soap operas all afternoon, eating junk food, and leaving wrappers all over the dining room. Once, I opened the living room door, and the baby had thrown up on my rug. No one cleaned it up until I mentioned it. She just said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see it." That day I locked myself in my room wanting to explode. I didn't say anything. I swallowed my anger because I still believed I could handle it, that I could endure a few more weeks, but I didn't know that was just the beginning. One Friday night, I had a video call with a potential client. We were closing an important contract, and I needed to concentrate. I let them know by text earlier that I would be busy in my room, that please, don't make any noise. What did they do? They had a get-together. Not a party with alcohol and people dancing, but a group of her friends playing cards in the living room, laughing, shouting, playing music. I closed my bedroom door, but I could still hear everything. I lost my focus. The client noticed I was uncomfortable, asked if everything was okay. I was embarrassed. That had never happened to me before. When I finished the call, I came out of my room and confronted them. I asked them, please, to keep it down, that I had already told them I had work. She replied sarcastically, "Oops, sorry, we didn't know you were so important." My dad just looked at the floor. That night was the first time I actually thought about kicking them out, not as a threat, but as a decision. But I still hesitated because he's my dad, because I don't want to be like him, because I grew up watching my mother give in, be diplomatic, seek balance even when she was being trampled on, and that stayed with me. But I also saw how it all ended for her, and I didn't want the same for myself. Another week passed. My dad started asking me for money. It wasn't much at first. "Can you help me with gas? I'll pay you back when I get paid." He never paid me back. Then, it was the supermarket. "I'm short this week. Can you cover it?" I didn't say no, but I didn't see any intention of him paying me back either. Every time I cooked for them, they ate like I was their personal chef. Not a thank you, not an offer to help clean up. She already felt like she owned the place. She'd go into my bathroom when hers was occupied, use my washing machine without asking, even went into my room once to leave a note on my desk. She wrote, "Qley, you have to organize your things more. What a mess your room is." I almost yelled at her. But the last straw was in mid-April. I was dating a woman, nothing serious, but we were seeing each other often. I invited her over one night to watch a movie. She came over relaxed, good vibes, everything was fine. But from the moment she walked in, this woman, my stepmom or whatever, gave her a look that made me cringe. She was cold, curt, uncomfortable. She didn't greet her. She stayed in the living room even though she knew we wanted privacy. She butted into the conversation. "And what do you do?" with a sour tone. My date felt awkward and left early. That night I exploded. I didn't say anything at the time, but the next day I talked to my dad. I told him I couldn't take it anymore, that this wasn't a hotel, that I felt like an intruder in my own house. He didn't know what to say. He asked me for another chance, told me it was temporary, that he would soon have a contract, that they were going to move. I didn't believe him. I knew they weren't going to leave. I knew he had lost control, and she knew it too. It showed in the way she moved around the house, in how she ignored me, in how she gave orders as if I were her son and not the owner of the roof over her head. That's when I started planning what was coming. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It took me days. I slept badly. I ate little. And all the time I had that anxiety in my chest, not because of fear, but because of that feeling of constant injustice. I felt that if I didn't do anything, if I kept allowing what was happening, I would end up consumed, not by them, but by myself, for having allowed it to go this far. The first thing I did was check the house deed. Everything was in my name, as it should be. I paid the mortgage, I paid the utilities, everything inside I had bought with my money or with the little my mom had left me when she moved. There was nothing they could claim as theirs, nothing. And that gave me strength. I decided to give them a deadline, a dignified exit, something that could close this chapter without turning it into war. I sat down with my dad one Saturday at noon when she wasn't there. She had gone to get her nails done or something. I don't care. I told him, calmly, but firmly, you have until May 15th to leave. I explained everything to him, how I felt, what I was enduring, and that I wasn't doing it out of revenge or whim. I was doing it because I needed my space back, because this was no longer sustainable. My dad didn't say anything for several seconds. He looked at me as if he didn't understand, as if he couldn't believe his own son was kicking him out. I clarified that he wasn't the problem, or not just him. It was her. It was her attitude, her way of being in the world as if everything belonged to her, her contempt for me, for my routine, for what I had built on my own. And it was him for allowing it, for not putting a stop to it. He asked me for time. I can't find a place that fast. I told him he had had months to look, that I had already waited too long, that if he had nowhere to go he could stay at his brother's or a friend's house, that I didn't care, that my responsibility was to my mental health, not to his new life. He asked me not to tell her anything yet, that he would take care of it. I gave him 5 days for that. 5, no more. Those 5 days passed, and he did nothing. She was still the same, bossing around, ordering, invading. She didn't even acknowledge me when I walked by. Sometimes, I heard her talking on the phone saying things like, I don't know what we would do without this house, or, I love this place. I wish we never had to move. My blood boiled. So I did it myself. I printed a letter, cold, formal, saying that as of May 15th they had to leave the property, that I no longer consented to their stay, that it was a final decision, that they didn't need to discuss it with me, because there was no turning back. I left it on the dining room table. I went to work at a coffee shop that afternoon. I didn't want to be there when she read it. When I returned, I already knew she had read the letter, because I found the kitchen trashed. The coffee maker she had brought was lying on the floor, a fake plant ripped from its pot. All her decorative touches were in pieces, as if that was her way of responding. My dad called me that night. He didn't come to talk in person, he called me. He told me she was very upset, that she felt attacked, betrayed, that I had humiliated her. I asked him if he understood anything I was saying, if he had at any point considered how I felt, living like a ghost in my own house. He told me yes, but that he thought everything would get better with time. I told him no, that this wasn't a phase, that it was over. From that day on, the tension was suffocating. She didn't talk to me, slammed doors, left dirty dishes as a provocation, walked with wet shoes down the hallway. One night, she turned the TV on full blast at 2 a.m. Another time, she left rotten food in the refrigerator just to make it stink. And my dad? Nothing. Blind, deaf, cowardly. The date was approaching and they weren't packing anything. Not a single box. Nothing indicated they were preparing to leave. So, a week before, I went further. I hired a lawyer, not to sue them, not to take legal action against them, but to have everything ready if they refused to leave. I asked him to draft a legal notice. I didn't want to go that far, but I needed to have it in hand just in case. I wasn't going to keep being Mr. Nice Guy while they walked all over me. On May 12th, 3 days before the deadline, I talked to my dad again. I told him that if they hadn't started packing by the evening of the 14th, I was going to change the locks. My voice didn't tremble. I didn't yell. I said it with the weariness of someone who doesn't want to argue anymore. He looked at me with disappointment, as if I were the bad guy. He replied, I didn't think you were capable of something like this. I said, me neither, but I am. That night, she insulted me. Not directly, but from her room, knowing I could hear her. She said things like, some kids should learn to be grateful for what they're given, or some people never grow up. I was disgusted. She didn't even deserve a response. At noon on the 14th, I saw my dad bringing down boxes, finally. She wasn't helping him. She was lying on the couch, arms crossed, face swollen. She didn't say a word to me, and he barely looked at me. He loaded his things into an old car, and, when he finished, he handed me the keys. He didn't even say goodbye. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. After they left, I didn't celebrate. I didn't crack a beer. I didn't play music. I didn't invite anyone over. I just sat on the couch, the same one where I so often felt like a guest, and breathed. It was strange because I thought I would feel happy, that I would have that feeling of freedom, but no. What I felt was emptiness, as if the storm had finally passed, but everything around me was in ruins. And yes, my house was in ruins. Not literally, but emotionally. The first thing I did was clean, not because I like it, but because I needed to get rid of their trace. The cups she had put out, in the trash, the decorations, out, the blankets they used on the couch, straight to Goodwill. I even changed the silverware. I needed everything to be mine again, to have no trace of that stage left, because yes, it was a stage, one of the most suffocating I've ever experienced. But, while cleaning, I found a folder. I hadn't seen it before. It was under a pile of magazines they left lying around. It was one of those plastic folders, half broken. I opened it impulsively, without knowing what to expect, and what I found there was worse than I imagined. Her medical papers, fertility reports, lab results, a sheet with something that looked like an artificial insemination plan, dated 2 months ago. I didn't understand anything at first. I thought maybe it was something she kept from before, but I kept reading. On one of the documents, there was a name written in pen, my dad's. It wasn't just any pregnancy, it was planned. She was trying to get pregnant on purpose, and, from what I understood, my dad wasn't fully aware of all the details, or so I wanted to believe, because if he knew, then he was as deep in it as she was. They used my house as a base for that makeshift family experiment that made no sense. That's when I understood why they didn't want to leave, why she moved around the house as if it were already hers. They were building something at my expense, and they didn't tell me because they knew I was going to say no, that I was never going to allow that woman to raise her child in a place I had built on my own, while she treated me as if I were the intruder. That night, I called my dad. I told him I had found the papers. He acted surprised, said he didn't know she had kept that there, that they had talked about having a child, but that he didn't think they were already making arrangements. It showed in his voice. He was trapped. He was silent for a few seconds, and then blurted out, "I thought if she got pregnant, everything would get better between you two." I didn't yell at him. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just replied, "Did you really think bringing a baby into this mess was a good idea?" Silence. And I hung up. I didn't call him again, nor did he call me. Weeks passed. The house gradually felt like mine again. I started working better, more focused. I felt stable for the first time in a long time. But it wasn't going to last. One day, when I came back from the grocery store, I found a letter in my mailbox, no return address. I opened it. It was from her. For handwritten pages, perfumed paper, forced cursive, as if she wanted to seem refined. It started with a "Dear" that already made me want to throw it away, but I read it, out of curiosity or morbid fascination. She accused me of ruining her relationship with my dad, of breaking something she was trying to save. She said I was selfish, that I never accepted her, that everything she did was for the family she wanted to create. Something beautiful with my dad and me, that she had made sacrifices for us, that she had even given up her old lifestyle to adapt to mine. And then, the worst part, she told me she was pregnant, that she didn't know if she was going to keep it, that she didn't know if my dad would be there, but that if she decided to go ahead with it, she wanted the baby to meet his older brother. Me. That's when I laughed. Not a happy laugh, a dry laugh, of anger, of helplessness, because that letter was a mix of manipulation, guilt, and cheap victimhood. She wanted me to feel bad, to doubt my decisions, to believe I was the bad guy. But no, I didn't respond. I kept the letter in a drawer, along with the medical papers. I locked it, not because I wanted to keep them, but because I knew this wasn't over, that she would be back somehow. And I wasn't wrong. A week later, I got a social media notification. An account I didn't know had commented on one of my old posts. It was a picture of my house, one I uploaded months ago. The comment said, "How sad that you think you own everything. Life charges a price, and it's your turn." The user had a fake name, no profile picture, but it didn't take a detective. It was her. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a family story gone wrong. It was a war, and I had no idea what was coming after that comment on my picture. I couldn't stay calm. I deleted it, of course, blocked the account, but I knew it wouldn't be the last time. That woman didn't know when to quit. And the worst part was that my dad was no longer part of the equation. He had disappeared off the face of the earth, as if everything that happened hadn't been enough to leave a mark. I expected at least a call, a text, a real apology, but no, nothing, total silence. A few days passed in calm, a false calm that doesn't last. I tried not to think about her or what she said in the letter. I didn't know if she was really pregnant or if she had made it up to get a reaction out of me. I didn't care, but I still had that underlying anxiety, that constant discomfort, like when you know something is about to explode, but you don't know when. And it exploded. One Friday afternoon, after getting back from the grocery store, I found my mailbox open again. Inside, there was a yellow envelope with my name written on it in black marker. No return address, again. It was heavier than the previous letter. I opened it right there, in the driveway, and what was inside made me freeze. Printed photos, in color, good quality. Pictures of me entering my house, working at my laptop, going out with the woman I was seeing. Even one where I'm in the backyard, in slippers, watering the plants. Pictures taken from afar, zoomed in. My hand trembled, not because there was anything illegal in the photos, but because of the message they implied. She was watching me, or someone was doing it for her. I don't know if it was her, from a car parked nearby, or if she had someone doing her this favor, but she knew where I lived, she knew who I went out with, she knew my schedule. And that made my stomach churn. I went inside and locked the door. I drew the curtains, turned off the lights. I felt real fear for the first time since all this started. Not because of what she could do to me physically, but because I realized she wasn't okay, that her obsession wasn't just with my dad, but also with me, that her rage, her resentment, was directed at me because she needed a clear enemy, and that enemy was me. I called a friend who works in private security. I told him the basics. He told me to install cameras, not just for protection anymore, but to have proof if this got out of control. The next day, he came over and helped me set them up, 3 outside, 1 in the living room. I didn't want to fill the house with paranoia, but I needed something to give me control, even if it was an illusion of control. I also went to the police, not to report her yet, but to make a record. I showed them the photos, told them I didn't know who took them, but that I had suspicions. They took my statement, gave me a case number, and told me that if anything else happened, I had to come back. Nothing will happen if there's no direct threat. So I waited. And while I waited, I went on with my life, or tried to. But every time I left the house, I looked both ways. Every time the doorbell rang, I tensed up. Every social media notification was an alarm. She didn't appear, but her shadow was there, as if she had entered my routine without needing to be physically present. One day, while checking the recordings from the outdoor camera, I saw her. She walked past my house. She didn't stop, didn't look directly, but it was her, with sunglasses, her hair up, talking on her phone, walking slowly, like someone taking a casual stroll. But it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just once. I checked the previous days, and there she was, Monday, Wednesday, Friday again. She was back in the neighborhood. I don't know if she was living nearby or just coming to check, but that was enough to take the next step. I went back to the police station, showed them the videos. They listened to me more attentively this time. They asked me if there had ever been any physical violence. I told them no, but that the situation was escalating, that I didn't want to wait for something to happen. They recommended a restraining order, gave me the paperwork to file for it, but the process was slow. And while that was going on, one night I was woken up by a noise. It was 2:47 a.m. A thud against the front window. I jumped up. I went to the living room in silence, my heart pounding. I carefully parted the curtain. There was no one there, but there was something in the yard, a box. I went out with my phone in hand, recording. I approached it. It was an old shoebox. Inside, photos again. But this time they weren't of me, they were of my mom. Old pictures of her, younger, with my dad, at the beach, in the kitchen, at Christmas 2001. Photos I didn't have, which were probably at my dad's house, meaning, among the things that were now with her. And a note, a torn piece of paper written in red marker. This is how it all started, this is how it will end. I froze. That sentence made no sense, of course, but it sounded like a threat, a coded message. I didn't know what to do. I just went back inside, locked everything, called the police. They came, took the report, took the box. They asked me if I had any enemies. I told them her name. And again, the same thing. Without proof that it was her, they couldn't do much. But I knew this wasn't just a hurt ex-stepmom. It was something darker, sicker, that had crossed a line, and that if I didn't do something, next time it wouldn't just be a box. After that night, sleeping wasn't the same. Any sound, any shadow out of place would wake me up. I started checking the cameras at least 3 times a day, even when there were no notifications. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being realistic. That box, that note, the photos, nobody does that by accident. And even though I had no physical proof that it was her, my gut no longer had any doubts. No one else was so close. No one else had a motive. The worst part was that my dad still didn't say anything. Not a call, not a text, nothing. As if he never existed. As if when he walked out the door that day with his boxes, he also decided to erase any connection with me. And that hurt more than anything. Because, even through all the crap, I was still his son. He knew what she was capable of, or at least he sensed it, but he chose to keep quiet, to leave me alone. And that's not easily forgiven. A week after the box, I got mail. Not an email, a yellow envelope like the one before, but this time delivered by the postal service, with a stamp and everything. My full name on the front, my correct address. The sender was a law firm. I thought it was something related to the restraining order, but no. When I opened the envelope, I almost laughed. She was suing me. Yes, you read that right. A civil lawsuit for wrongful eviction, emotional distress, and psychological damage. All written in a ridiculous tone. It said that I had emotionally abused her, that I had forced her to leave her home without notice, that I had destroyed personal belongings, and that I had threatened her. I didn't know whether to laugh or break something, because, on top of everything else, she was twisting the facts. She was trying to rewrite the story as if she had been the victim of all this. I called my lawyer, the same one who helped me prepare their exit. I took him the documents. He told me it was absurd, that she had no way of winning that there wasn't even a basis for it to seriously proceed, but that I had to respond anyway, that not responding would be a mistake. So we started preparing my defense. But, beyond the paperwork, what bothered me the most was that she didn't want to leave me alone, that she had turned this into a personal crusade, that it was no longer about the house, or my dad, or the supposed baby. It was something more. It was as if she needed to destroy me because I didn't let her stay, because I didn't play the role of the fake son in that fake family she invented. And yet, there was something that didn't add up. Where was she getting the time and money? My dad hadn't had a stable income for months. She didn't work. She lived on air. And yet, she was paying lawyers, making prints, moving things, as if she had backing. Something didn't fit. So, I started investigating. I went to see my uncle, my dad's brother. I was never close to him, but I respected him. He lived out in the suburbs and owned a mechanic shop. I found him working, his hands covered in grease and his face as surprised as mine when I told him everything. He didn't know anything. My dad had told him that he had moved temporarily due to relationship issues. He never mentioned that he lived with me, never said anything about her. And, what's stranger, he hadn't seen him for over a month. The last thing I knew is that he had gone to some friend's house in Houston to look into that business he wants to set up, he told me. Houston. No one had mentioned Houston to me. I went home and called him, for the first time in weeks. He answered on the third try, his voice flat. I told him I needed to talk to him, that what was happening had crossed all the lines. He asked me not to say anything over the phone, that if I wanted, he would see me in person. I told him no, that it was too late for cordial meetings, that I had a lawsuit against me because of his girlfriend, and that I at least deserved an explanation. He was silent and then blurted out, "You're not alone in this. She's not acting on her own." I asked him to explain. He told me she had someone behind her. It wasn't her idea to send me those things. It wasn't her who was pushing everything. That there was a lawyer friend of hers from before who was advising her, a guy who, according to my dad, had some kind of obsession with righting family wrongs, a kind of crusader who was using her as a personal case. I didn't understand anything. I asked him, "And you, what are you doing in the meantime?" Hiding in Houston waiting for it all to blow over. And then he exploded. He told me he was fed up, that he had lost everything, that the business hadn't worked out, that he was in debt, that she was driving him crazy, that he didn't know how to get out of the hole. That's why he had distanced himself, because he had nothing more to offer me, neither as a father, nor as a man. I didn't feel sorry for him, not this time. I told him he had to put a stop to it, that if he didn't, I would. And then he shouldn't come crying to me saying he didn't know. He hung up without saying goodbye. 2 days later, I received a summons for the first hearing. It wasn't the trial. It was to see if the lawsuit had any merit. My lawyer went with me. The courtroom was small, cold. She came in with her lawyer, a guy in a cheap suit, with the face of a televangelist who'd lost his way. He didn't even look at me. She sat down in front, took out her papers, and started talking as if I were a textbook abuser. My lawyer responded with everything we had: property records, camera footage, my previous complaint, her letter, the box, everything. The judge didn't even let it go on for long. He said the case lacked legal basis and dismissed it. And she stood up as if she didn't understand, as if she couldn't believe she had been told no. Her lawyer looked at her as if he didn't know what to do with her. I didn't say a single word. I walked out of there feeling relieved, but also with a knot in my stomach, because even though I had won, I knew it wasn't over. That kind of person doesn't accept defeat. They don't reason, they don't give up. And, sure enough, 3 days later, she reappeared. This time, in person, at my front door, with a suitcase and a face I'll never forget. It was Thursday, around 9 p.m. I was about to go to bed. It had been a long day, between catching up on work and the emotional hangover from everything I'd been through. I wasn't expecting visitors, texts, or calls. I didn't want to hear from anyone. Then, there was a knock at the door. Once, twice, loud, as if they didn't know if there was anyone inside, but wanted to make sure. I looked through the peephole. It was her, standing there, on the porch, with a rolling suitcase, a backpack slung over her shoulder, and an expression I couldn't decipher at the time. She wasn't crying or smiling. No anger, no sadness, just empty, tired, as if she had just lost a war. I didn't open the door. I stayed looking through the peephole, waiting for her to leave. I thought if I didn't open it, she would go away. But no. She took out her cell phone. I assumed she would call me, but no. She put it away. And then, without warning, she sat down on the porch, next to her suitcase, as if she was going to spend the night there, as if that was normal. I spent at least 10 minutes like that, pacing, thinking about whether I should call the police again, whether I should go out and tell her to leave, whether I should ignore her. But something told me that if I didn't handle it in person, she wouldn't stop, that if I didn't close this with my own words, she would continue to linger like a shadow. I opened the door. I didn't say anything. I crossed my arms and stood in the doorway, without moving. She lifted her head. She looked at me as if we were in a different movie, as if the last few months hadn't happened, as if everything she did didn't exist. He kicked me out. I didn't answer. Your dad. He kicked me out. He yelled horrible things at me. He told me I ruined his life, that you were right, that he never loved me, that he used me to escape his misery. She spoke without pausing, without emotion, as if reciting something she had repeated to herself 1,000 times to believe it. I asked her what she wanted. I have nowhere to go. I thought maybe. And she stopped there, as if waiting for me to complete the sentence. I asked her if she really thought that, after everything, I was going to let her in, that if she thought the same person she tried to destroy with lies, lawsuits, harassment, and manipulation was now going to offer her a couch. She didn't flinch, she just looked down. I didn't come to stay, just to be heard. I told her she had 5 minutes. And then, she began. She told me that everything got out of hand, that at first she just wanted to fit in, to feel part of something, that she couldn't stand me ignoring her, looking at her as if she were an intruder, that she had no one else. That when she lost her job, my dad was her only option. That having a child was his idea, not hers. That yes, it was crazy, but they did it together. That when I kicked them out, he promised her that everything would be all right, that he had plans, that he was going to get money, that they were in this together. But then he started to change. He became cold. He blamed her for everything. He didn't touch her, didn't look at her, didn't listen to her. He would shut himself in his home office all day and only come out to eat and complain. That she felt like a piece of furniture. That one day, after an argument, he told her he couldn't take it anymore, that she had to leave, that he wasn't even going to discuss it. I've been at a friend's house for 2 days, but I can't stay any longer. I have no money, no family. I just came to tell you that I'm not the monster you think I am. I asked her if she was pregnant. No. And then she lowered her voice. I lost the baby a month ago. I didn't tell you before because it didn't matter anymore. I didn't know what to say. Not because I felt sorry for her, but but because, for the first time in this whole story, I saw she was broken. Not crazy, not evil, broken, like those people who become warped versions of themselves because of bad decisions. I wasn't going to forgive her or justify her, but I understood that she was a person who was just as lost, or even more so, than my dad. I told her to leave, that I couldn't help her, that I didn't want to see her again. I didn't yell. I said it the way you say things when you're tired of fighting. "What if something happens to me?" she asked, as if she wanted to leave me with the guilt. I replied that if that was a threat, I would report her on the spot. She got up without another word, took her suitcase, adjusted her backpack, looked at me one more time with those eyes that no longer pleaded for compassion, but only for a way out. "I hope that someday you'll understand that I just wanted a family." She walked to the corner, got into an Uber, and disappeared. I haven't heard anything since then, not from her, not from my dad. The house is quiet, life too. No more visits, no lawsuits, no letters, no boxes. It's as if the storm has passed, but I'm still picking up the pieces. And the saddest thing is that when something like this happens, you're never the same again. Nor do you want to be. I don't know how something like this is supposed to end. There's no happy ending, no redemption, no forced reconciliation. There's only what happens when a story reaches a point where there's nothing left to do but cut it off. And I've already cut everything off. With her, with him, with the idea of family that they instilled in me since I was a kid, and that turned out to be a complete facade. 3 months have passed since I last saw her. 3 months without hearing from my dad either. The last I heard was from my uncle. He texted me to tell me that my dad was in Arizona, that he had called him from there looking for money, but that he had told him no. That he sounded bad, defeated, as if he was tired of bearing the weight of all his decisions, but without the guts to do anything about it. And, honestly, I'm not surprised. I haven't contacted him again. I don't plan to. Not out of pride, but for my own peace of mind. All this time I've been focusing on rebuilding. Not in a romantic or inspirational way, simply trying to get back to basics. Waking up without wondering if someone left the stove on. Going into my kitchen and knowing that things are where I left them. Going out to the patio without finding trash or dishes lying around. Sleeping knowing there's no silent war waiting for me the next day. Simple things, but after what I went through, they feel like luxuries. I also distanced myself from everything that reminded me of that time. I even stopped talking to the woman I was dating. Not because anything happened between us, on the contrary, she was a good person throughout. But I wasn't okay, and I couldn't drag her into that. When you're truly broken, the last thing you want is to pull someone else into the same hole. So I walked away. She understood. Sometimes she texts me to check in. I appreciate that, but I don't know if I have the energy to try anything new. Not yet. What bothered me most about all of this was realizing how easily the perception of reality can be twisted. I had an image of my dad, not perfect, but solid, someone who worked his whole life, who taught me certain things by example, and yes, with flaws, with absences, but also with genuine moments. And that image was shattered in a matter of months. Not because he fell in love with another woman. That can happen. What is unforgivable is the cowardice, the way he chose someone who dragged him into the mud and decided to stay there, out of comfort or fear, that he preferred to look the other way rather than stop it in time. Sometimes I wonder if my mom always knew, if she saw all this coming. She was always stronger than she let on. A week after all the drama, I went to visit her in North Carolina, where she'd moved in with her best friend. She welcomed me as if nothing had happened, but she knew. She looked at me with those, "I told you so," eyes without saying it. I told her everything, unfiltered. She didn't interrupt me. She just listened. When I finished, she poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to me, and said, "Now you're starting to understand why I never remarried." That phrase hung in the air. Not as advice, not as a judgment, just as a fact. I drove back home feeling calmer after that. Not happier, but lighter, as if I was finally closing the loop, as if I no longer needed answers, or apologies, or redemption from anyone. What happened, happened, and what comes next is up to me. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.